Hello, everyone. It is always my pleasure to welcome guests to this show to have discussions about things that are going on. And once again, I am really, really delighted to welcome someone who is very special, not just as a person, but as someone who is also a great scholar, whose scholarship I actually admire. She is Dr. Matilda Isaac Mustapha of Madonna University in Michigan, and she is a professor in the School of Business, where she teaches quantitative methods, technology, and management. Dr. Isaac Mustapha, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, how are things in Detroit today?
Well, a little sunny. We're still home for a while till June 12th, I think. We just got an extension of our stay-at-home order, so it'll
Right.
be in for a while.
As you know, I am a great admirer of your work.
Thank you.
And I think it was just over a year ago, you actually presented a real scholarly paper at the conference that we had here
Yeah.
on science, society, and spirituality. And your paper on that day was titled Workplace Spirituality and Transformational Leadership, a Proximal Prediction of Employee Outcome. So, what is workplace spirituality?
Um, in order for us to better understand workplace spirituality, because oftentimes when we hear spirituality, people think about religion. But it's important that we make a clear distinction. So, a religion will be spirituality in terms of religion, will be more vertical spirituality. So, we're looking more at a faith based, your faith, believing in a God, believing in a higher being. When we look at spirituality in the workplace, we're looking at spirituality in a more horizontal, and more in terms of the meaningfulness of what you do, what you attach to what you do, your values, and some of the ideas you bring into the organization. You're also looking at a sense of self. And so before we add religion and add all these other aspects of life, we all are human beings that are spirit beings. You understand?
I get it. And this is actually one of the reasons why I admire your work greatly, because your scholarship looks at the individual as a whole person, which means then that even when you're looking at our behavior in the workplace, and you're looking at it from the point of view of that concept of workplace spirituality, you're also thinking in terms of the values and the self-awareness that we bring with us into the workplace. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So that's my reading of some of your work. So the question then is, what is the place of those values and self-awareness and all of those other things that you look at? What is the place of those pieces in the consideration, or at least your consideration of workplace spirituality?
Right. So at first I look at the when we go into a workplace, when we start from the interview and you get the offer, you look at the job. There's a what we call a psychological contract that you have already attached to the job. And so one of the things that we all look for is to go into a workplace and get some sense of satisfaction. What we bring into that workplace, our own sense of identity. And we are hoping to merge our values with that of the workplace. So you come in with some form of self-actualization. That's the quote we come in with. But then we move beyond that and we go into this place where it's not just about self anymore. Then we become selfless. So the selflessness brings other people into the picture. So we have now shifted from just, okay, now I have self-actualized. We don't crystallize at that point. We keep growing because even Abraham Maslow talks about that, right? You keep growing. So in the growth, we bring in things that will motivate us to transcend that form, go into a whole nother level, which is now, how do I now relate with others on the job? So if a leader was looking at this, how do I get people to buy into the vision of the company? How do I make the employees more committed? How do I satisfy them on the job? How do I make them more fruitful, more productive? How do I put all these things together whereby the employee now has a whole being? So from the human resource perspective, you're looking more at, the well-being. And then we go back and look for meaningful work. So what is meaningful work? So we're looking more at this point into the psychological perspective. And then when you start looking into the interpersonal perspective, now we are now looking at my connection with my coworkers. So somehow the organization has to create that trust that breeds commitment. And so I'm able to identify personally with that organization.
I mean, you have just put a lot on the table, but there are two things there that I really want to take you back to. One of them is your use of the word selflessness, that we come into the workplace with ourselves, with our sense of self, and that at some point we become selfless. You are not suggesting, are you, that we then lose ourselves to our jobs and to our employers so they take us over? That's not what you're suggesting.
No. What I'm actually saying is this, that what you give out it's nature. So we're now looking at nature. So if you give out something, and if you're giving out this good great attitude in the workplace, it is impossible for somebody not to notice that or be influenced by that. It is impossible. But if we go into, because we're expecting a lot from our leaders, but even just looking at us employees as ourselves, we have to go in with some level of contribution. So we're going in as well to contribute. We're going in as well to create an environment that's peaceful, even for our colleagues. And so that we can work. If you've ever been in an environment where there's just one person that doesn't seem to fit in, it really throws everyone off. Now, does that mean that they have not self-actualized? No, not necessarily so. But it seems as though it's possible that something is at par. So I'm not sure if it's maybe the job environment or maybe just the values are not merging. So there is a point where, yes, oftentimes in companies we feel like, maybe we're being overused, overworked. I don't want to keep doing and keep doing and keep doing. But this is where you begin to pay attention to the environment where you work in. How ethical is the environment that you're working in? Because this is where the discrepancy comes in, right? The issue of ethics. If the environment is ethical, you will see some of the traces of this, where it would be as though you're working in a community that's interconnected. And you want to be a part of that connection. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. That actually brings me to the second point. I mean, I think that it's not something that's really very frequently spoken, but it's one of the areas that you are interested in your scholarship, which is really the area of transformational leadership. Because it seems to me that one of the things that you're saying is that not only do employees have a sense of self, or should have that, and not only should they also be striving to crystallize that sense of self so that they become whole, even in the workplace, but that the workplace also has a responsibility to help them bring that all together. But how can that happen without leadership? And while you are answering that question, I also want you to begin to think of one thing, because it seems to me that one of the things that tend to happen sometimes in the workplace is the fact that you can actually go into some business environments and then you can tell by the culture of the place, by the way the people behave, by the way they dress. And you can see that in even some colleges, some universities, you can actually tell what the character of the leader is in that environment. So now I am asking you to address two things. One is the whole concept of transformational leadership, which you are interested in, how that fits in here. And secondly, the responsibility of leadership to make the employee whole. And then thirdly, this whole idea of the organizational culture and how it is that you can see that organizational culture and get a sense of the quality or the type of leadership that exists there, right?
Good, absolutely. And glad you brought this point up, because the transformational leadership has been talked about over and over and over again, because this leadership style has a very strong emotional intelligence. So, and there's a couple of traits that go with that. So they are self-aware. So that comes back to where they're self-actualized. But then they are also able to have empathy. So now they're not only self-aware, but they have empathy for others. So they are aware of others and how others may react to certain things. Then they move on to being able to manage their own emotion and also manage the emotions of the environment. So they take a temperature of the environment that they're in and they have a better understanding. Now, some people believe that when you're a transformational leader, that there are times where you have to show other leadership skills, qualities. So not just a transformational leader, but I have been thinking lately about situations whereby within a company, something would change that would allow you, makes a leader move from transformational to transactional. Every employee is different. So depending on who you're working with, I want to believe that the transformational leader is better suited as a situational leader, because what happens is they're able to address every situation as it comes. And if you're dealing with employees that are able to assimilate, fine. Those that are not able to, they know exactly how to work around that situation to get a good result from them. They also allow for autonomy. A lot of times in companies, the little guy doesn't feel empowered. There is no motivation. They feel no one notices their work. And this is where the transformational leader comes in, is able to pull these people together from up to the bottom, everybody together, you matter. So what is your contribution? How can we make this environment better for you? You talked about the responsibility as well, right, of the transformational leader. And that's part of the thing I was talking about. So the responsibility of this leader is not only to share the vision of the organization, but to sell the vision of the organization and understand how to put everybody in a position whereby they feel like a part of this vision. And so you cannot call a meeting where changes will be made at the lower level without involving people at the lower level. And so there comes the spirituality in the workplace where everybody feels a sense of self. They feel like I am a part of the growth. I am a part of the development in the process and moving forward. Did that help a little?
Yes, it does. And it seems to me then that a transformational leader also has to be one who is comfortable in who he or she is. Because we understand, I mean, and part of this is cultural. It doesn't mean cultural in terms of the country or society where one comes from, but just cultural because we are human beings that have aspects of us that are themselves cultural in nature. Very often there are leaders who tend to see themselves up there and everyone else down here. So for leaders like that, then it will be difficult if you are suggesting to them that they need to bring people that they consider to be at the bottom into a meeting or into a place where the discussion is about those people. Because very often people are used to top-down leadership. So what is your idea of the level of self-concept, level of spirituality that the transformational leader has to have to actually qualify to be called one?
Right. Now, the transformational leader is not intimidated by seeing someone's own success. The transformational leader is not intimidated because they want everyone to prosper around them. If the group does well, then it reflects on the leadership. And so when you see a leader that's doing everything they can to suppress the growth of their employees or their followers, that leader has something that's missing in the whole process of actualization. They have not gotten to the top where they've self-actualized yet. There is some type of identity crisis. Something is going on, and it may not have to do with anybody in there. It may be personal. And so what I find that works well, what I have seen with employees, when they feel that the place that I spend most of my time in a week is not a prison. When I'm going to work, there's no anxiety. Oh, here we go again. That employee is going to have a problem performing well. They would do what they need to do just for those hygiene factors, but the motivational factors will be lacking. Now, there are cases, I always say the outliers, where some people have what I call the self-efficacy. Those people, regardless of what environment they find themselves, they would perform and they would deliver. But that is not to say that would be the case for everybody. So it is better to be a leader that can empathize, that can understand that just because your employees want to know more, they want to do more, they want to be a part of the process, that should not be a threat that they are setting themselves up to take your job. If you're doing well at what you're doing, then there should be no fear at all. In fact, you want them to grow so that you yourself can grow.
You know, I was born and raised in Nigeria, and growing up there, we always heard questions like, are leaders born or are they made? Mm-hmm. So I just thinking about that, I'm tempted to ask you, and I have just fallen for the temptation to ask you, are transformational leaders born or are they made? Can transformational leadership be taught and learned?
Yes, yes. I say this because both, and I say both. I say they can be born and they can be made. You've often have you seen a child perform in such a way that you say, this child is going to be a good leader someday. You just see it in them. There's something that's just in them. You've seen 2-year-old, 3-year-olds, and because they have some type of identity formation going on. They might not have actualized yet, but there's something that's building in them that tells you this child is going to be great. And you see them as they get older, you see them a teenager, and you're like, oh, there's potential. I always knew it. But then there are some where, and I always like to use the teachers. The teachers come back later and say, wow, what happened? Wow, you've really like just grown. Something happened. So yes, because sometimes there are some that are late. I call them late boomers. It takes them a while because they need to go through the process of learning, making mistakes and learning, and making mistakes and learning. So both, they can be born. Some people are born leaders. You see them from young. And there are others that have to learn by experience. They learn by some of the experiences in life. And the environment in which you grow up too would actually help determine that. If you grow up in an environment that's motivating, environment where your creativity is allowed to emerge and no one is, oppressing or suppressing your ideas are looked upon as valuable, I think, you can actually learn to be a transformational leader.
Right. So if you put together the two major things that we've been looking at, workplace spirituality as a concept, and leadership and the role of leadership and the employer in making sure that people are whole in the workplace. Is it possible then to walk into an organization and say, in this organization, workplace spirituality is evident? Is it something that you can see or feel?
Yes. The environment, you would know, because the like I said, the commitment, the trust level, the ability for people, when people are able to contribute without fear, they give their opinion about things without fear of retribution. If there's you would see it. You would see that, oh, this guy, the guy at the postal session just gave a recommendation to the president as to something, and the president even sometimes would even give a remark and say, this person brought this idea up. You as an employee, the first thing you're thinking about was like, wow, they pay attention to anybody that works there. You would see the satisfaction that comes with it. You would see things that have been put in place already. Professional development have been put in place. Inclusion, having, inclusion officer, including people in decision making. There are different things and different facets and positions that will be in place that you will know that these people are interested in the well-being of their workers. And even the human resource area, that's the first thing that I look at. See what type of programs they have. See what type of plans they have. See what type of activities they have going on for the employees. See if the organization do things to bring everyone together. It doesn't matter if we went to Starbucks and got a coffee. It doesn't matter. The fact that they're coming together and doing something together, forming some type of bond, allows people to look forward to the next thing. What else are we going to do this time? Are we going to have strategic groups and strategic meetings that are going to be solving problems? Are we going to be doing a SWOT analysis to prioritize what we need to fix? And our voice is being heard. So those things are yes, you can see it. It's something that you cannot miss it. You see it.
Right. So I know that you really just focus on scholarship and you generally don't get into politics. But as I listen to your discussion about workplace spirituality and transformational leadership and so on, I am wondering if it is possible to get you to extend the discussion of that concept and even of transformational leadership to look at our society, look around the world and look at our country, look wherever you want to look, whether it's in local government or national government or governments internationally. Is it possible at all to extend the discussion of workplace spirituality to try to understand what we currently face in today's world? If you don't want to get into the politics, just tell me that you're not comfortable doing it.
No. Good question too. I have been thinking a lot. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and just especially with our current situation in the world. And this is something that affects the entire world. So it brings light to the different types of leaders and how they handle situations. In crisis, you want a real good situational leader who can be transformational when they need to be, transactional when they need to be, and maybe at times they just may need to be autocratic. So, for example, you cannot be at war with the enemy that you're going to need in the future. That's not beneficial to anybody. You have to be able to give and take as well. And you have to be able at the same time to draw lines and draw boundaries. The biggest thing for me is I am finding that a lot of leaders are really not selfless. Because if we had selfless leaders, we wouldn't have the type of crisis and the amount of people that have died today that would have died of COVID. It's appalling to know that a leader, whether it's at a state level, local government level, can sit in their homes, look at their own family and their children, safe, keep them safe, have all the amenities and all the resources to make sure that they are safe, but yet put everybody else's son and daughter and mother and brother and sister out on the street and say, well, some people just have to go. That's not how this is supposed to work. If you are a transformational leader, you would have some type of empathy. You would have a better understanding of how people are feeling. And it is with that feeling that you make your decision. You also would be open to listening to expert ideas and expert advice, because to put out misinformation, wrong information, no information is one of the biggest problems that we are having. Is deception everywhere. One world leader to another, one world leader to another. There's this feeling of I'm untouchable. I can say what I want, do what I want, feel however I want, and people will still put me in office. And so that speaks to the conscience of all of us that are voters. what is happening to our human spirit that we cannot discern a good leader, that we cannot discern someone that has the heart to want to help. That's what you want as a leader. Some of us on one side are very focused on our money. So we believe this type of leader gives us money. Well, the question now is, where is the money now to spend? So there are things that would happen as a consequence of choosing the wrong leader, that money that you think you're trying to protect with this leader, you're going to end up spending it later. It's like the person that works all this overtime, and then when they retire, they fall ill, and all the money that they have saved through their overtime is now what they use on medical bills. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's counterintuitive and counterproductive. And so what I'm hoping would happen is, through this whole time of COVID and everything that we're going through in the world, not just COVID, just wars and rumors of wars, that people would go back to their human spirit, check their conscience. Maybe people need to begin to really self-actualize. It looks like some people are skipping some steps. Something has happened where people are not comfortable allowing others who know more than them to lead. We are seeing more incompetence rising to the top than people who are competent. We are seeing more reward for bad behavior, negative reinforcement, than people who are actually doing the work getting rewarded. The humility that goes with a transformational leadership is lacking all over the world. There's pride, there's ego. Everybody wants to be a superpower. Now, some might say, I sound naive. I think everything has to be hunky-dory and everything has to be just nice, smooth, kumbaya. No, that's not what I'm saying. Like I said, there's time for everything. But this is the time where the human spirit, humanity has to show itself. And it's happening with people all over in little places. However, it's the leadership that we need. Because with the leadership, it's a trickle-down effect. People will begin to feel, you know what, this leader cares. Maybe I should do something good for somebody. Maybe I should do something good for someone else. Do you understand?
I do, and it just makes me think of the kinds of things that can happen in moments of crisis. What I do not know is that, and I keep thinking about it, is whether or not most of us actually believe that we are in a moment of leadership crisis. Because if we're in a moment of leadership crisis, it will seem to me that most of us, and maybe we're just getting there, and this global health crisis has just really driven us all further to a point of acknowledgement that as a world we are in trouble. And then he who is down really doesn't need to fear any fall, because you can get to a point where you can't fall beyond that point. You have to start getting up. So I do have, instead of continuing with the thought that I had, I would like to ask you, as you study leadership and you study society and you study spirituality, do you think that we are already at that point or getting near to that point where we would all begin to say, this is really bad, maybe we need to start turning around?
I don't think so. If that's the case, then people will not defy the orders to go out when they're not supposed to. A hairstylist would not have tested positive or they have some type of symptom and still have people under them and their washer and their dryer, washing. You wouldn't do that. I think that we have a long way to go. We wouldn't have the shootings that we see. No, we're not there yet. It seems as though, I'm not sure if we're getting worse or maybe we're getting desensitized. There's good on this earth. There is good on this earth. So, you don't want anyone to think that, oh no, we only see the gloom. No. The gloom is so loud that it almost drowns out the good. That's the problem that we're having. So people are now almost desensitized. It's just been bad for so long, like, you said, it's like, how bad can it get? How worse can it get?
In fact, you're making me think of Maslow. and it will bring us back to a discussion of the organization. Because Maslow was a guy who identified what he called a hierarchy of needs. And at the most basic level was security, hunger, and feeding, food, and say that those are the most basic needs of a human being. We want to feel secure, we want to be able to feed, and you rise through many different levels until you get to a point of self-actualization. And he said, you really cannot move on to satisfy the next level of need until you have satisfied the one just before it. So just listening to you talking about how it seems like we are really worse now than where we were. And understanding that the human life course really is not a straight line, and there are trajectories that are involved. So I am wondering if you would also look at that and say, and also consider the fact that organizations that thought they had already self-actualized, and now they are all just crashing over the last few months. I wonder how you look at that as a business professor, and who is interested in spirituality and transformational leadership and so on. I wonder how you look at this crisis and what it means for the future of organizations.
The crisis doesn't help the situation, because now we're going to shift from the human interconnection. We're going online. So now it becomes man versus technology. So the mode of production now, it's going to something that's more impersonal. So if when we were together, we couldn't connect, it's going to become more difficult now for us to really connect. Students are on a Zoom call and they shut off their video. There are Zoom calls where people shut off their video. So I really don't have to deal with you now if I don't want to. If I managed you before and I was forced to before, where I had to get in the groove, now I don't have to. So the question for a lot of organizations now is, how are you going to maintain that connectivity and that influence, the human to human influence that you have? How are you going to now maintain that in this virtual world that we're about to get into? Some companies are going online permanently. What happens to the employees? So everyone now is just a number. When we're on here, I see you, Dr. Ohiro Oni-Eseleh, Dr. Mustapha, and that's what we would become, numbers and just name tags. So,
I'm glad that you went there, but as an old man, I'm also scared because, I really enjoy calling myself an old man because it reminds me that I've been around for a long time. But here's the reality. I have wrestled with whether this is social distancing or physical distancing, but listening to you, the fact that it's really not just physical but social distancing really has been brought to fore by what you have just described. And so it makes me worried about the future that we are creating. I have personally said that students come to university, they choose to come, even in an era where we have so much online education. They choose to come because they want that personal connection. But it seems to me that right now, just by doing what we've been doing over the last few months, we have actually really just created experts in online learning. So why do they need to go back to where we were? And you are addressing that. And as you address that, I'm also wondering if, I know you're not a psychologist, but you're a business professor, and also a technology professor who is looking ahead and looking at the advances in technology. So would you say that we are in a good place or we're in a bad place? But even if one says that it's a bad place, can you see some advantages to our current almost complete dependence on technology?
It's good for the country in terms of world competition. So we have technological advancement. The question becomes at what cost? How can we make this more personal? For the instructor, the professor in the classroom, what can you do? If even when we go back and you have 10 students at a time or 12 students at a time with masks on, the whole situation looks robotic. What about team learning? So it's not all bad. There are some advantages to it. We'll become more competitive, technologically, we're more competitive. But really, the social distancing that we're getting ready to experience, it doesn't help anybody psychologically. A lot of our students are going to come back with a lot of stress from being cooped up in the home for months. And we're already, and this is a whole nother topic that I don't want to go into, because we've already been talking about the issue of even mental illness in this country. And we have not really handled that well. Just imagine, not just from being cooped up in the house for a long time or the cabin fever, but just imagine the financial stress and strain. People have lost their entire retirement. People have lost money that they've put aside for their children and grandchildren, generations to come, that they don't think they have enough time to make that money up in the next 10, 20 years. So there's a lot of stressors that are going to come into play. I cannot tell you that I have the answer as to how we're going to mitigate all these factors. But there is no way technology can become personal. They're two different things. So yes, we'll do good technologically, we'll do good maybe, with the economy, we'll do good when it comes to in competition, world competition, but the other sociological factors, the other psychological factors is something that we really have to start looking into and putting things in place, because that's coming. That's a whole nother employment has already hit. So we see that already. That already, the effects of that psychologically is something that we need to think about. And then you think about the students and think about the fact that we're social distancing. I used to be able to sit in the class and you talk to students, the zone of proximal development. So we're close and we're talking. And now here, we're not able to do that anymore. And I was actually working on a paper where we were talking about just being in the classroom and developing your class structure where students are able to work together, and how I find that very meaningful, because I saw the grades of my students begin to go up when I do activities, not just sitting down or just talking for 3 hours, but there's activities, there's back and forth question and answer. They get up, they do some stuff on the board, they sit down, they sit with each other, they brainstorm, they watch a YouTube video, they, to reinforce the same material in 3 hours. So it's exciting for them. I find that the grades began to go up significantly. Well, we've just gone back now. So where do we go from here? Where would academic integrity, where would that come in all of this? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot for us to think about. What our parents and our grandparents and the scholars ahead before us, like yourself and others, what you have prided yourself on was integrity of your work, and not having to cheat your way through exams. We're already dealing with that with online classes already. So just imagine now, everything is on the internet. We have a lot.
Yes, we do indeed. And that I would like to ask you as we round up. The work that we do very often influences us. And I can tell you that even this conversation has been cathartic for me, really. And so there is some catharsis involved. And so I am just wondering how this has changed you as a professor, and as you go into your classroom at Madonna University. How do you go in with your sense of workplace spirituality, and also recognizing all of the changes that are going on around you? And I'm wondering how all of those influence your approach to your teaching and to your research and to the lectures that you give around the world. How have you been impacted by all of these, and how do they continue to influence what you do?
It influences what I do. Like I was discussing with you, I'm working with a colleague right now on a paper, and we were actually had a proposal where we're actually talking about, looking at these activities in the classroom. But now, the conversation we had just yesterday was, how do you now bring this in-class activity into an online simulation where you begin to develop groups online to do the same thing that you do in class? And how do you, as an instructor, begin to moderate that? So yes, research begins to change. My research begins to change. This whole time has been a time of reflection for me. I have found myself more open to excuses from students. It's not my place to question anymore. I don't do a lot of questioning. When somebody says to me, because of COVID, I had to go home, I wasn't in the dorm, I had a problem, we didn't have a computer at home, I try to come up with ways to help them. So what for me as an instructor, I've become more really sympathetic. I am more accommodating. I am having a plan A, plan B, and plan C. Just in case A doesn't work for this group, then what do I have in place for B and C? With the whole stringent type of learning and the rigor, I have to sit down and just reevaluate how things are done. What am I going to put in place to be evaluated, but to make sure that they keep the same content and the same context, and they get the same information out. But a lot has really changed. Even testing has changed. What would be in class, and they would sit down and do a whole lot of math and stuff. I think about those things now. For example, when I teach operations management, there's a lot that I put into play now when I do it online. When we go back into the classroom, I know it's going to be systematic. It's going to be, phases. It will be interesting. So I'm preparing myself for that, mentally prepare myself to, if you're going to sit in a class and everybody has a mask, like I said, I could see it just really looking robotic. Yeah. So I'm preparing myself for that. And what do I do as an instructor to keep my student engaged? And in the short period of time that will be given to be with each other because of the spread, what can I get accomplished there, and what can I transition online? So there's a lot. There's a lot of reflection and a lot of thinking. For myself, during this time, I have grown. I have seen a lot. I have learned a lot. I'm understanding that life is not black and white. There's some gray areas, and how to handle each situation as they emerge.
There is still also a lot of conversation yet for us to have. Okay. But what I would like to do, because I was just thinking about it, is that because you not only just brought a lot, I know that there is a whole lot, because as you know, I have followed your work. So what I would like to do at some point, as soon, if you don't mind, is to bring together a bunch of scholars, and practitioners, and just have a conversation around this. Right. And I would like to invite you to be part of that.
Sure, my pleasure.
Great. I look forward to that. But I cannot thank you enough for coming out today to do this. And I hope that you continue to have a brilliant day, brilliant weekend ahead. Actually, just tomorrow is Memorial Day, so you don't have to work. I hope that you can savor, what I hope will be good weather in Detroit. For us here in New York, it will be bright weather. But thank you very much, Dr. Isaac Mustapha. I look forward to continuing to have conversations with you.
Thank you, Dr. Oni-Eseleh. My pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. You will agree that my conversation with Dr. Matilda Isaac Mustapha of Madonna University in Michigan was quite fulfilling. It was quite engaging. And we still left plenty on the table that we still need to discuss, which is why I invited her back. And I expect to have her back in the next few weeks. But in the meantime, I urge you to subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And after you do that, I would also urge you to go to my blog site at www.ruminationsblog.org and read my articles. And at the same time, please listen to my podcast, which you can access through Apple iTunes or just by going online and typing in Ruminations with Ohiro Oni-Eseleh. and you can follow my podcasts at the same time. I urge you to continue to watch my interviews, and on my part, I promise to continue to bring you great content. I look forward to you doing that and me doing what I have promised. Thank you.